I'm an investor in treasury bonds, and so I do know the benefits. And one of the things that government has tried to encourage investment in bonds has also been cutting the interest rate. As you will be aware, in 2019, government reduced the interest rate on treasury bond incomes from 20% to 10%, and so that would be a welcome move. I was up country and shared with a friend, but you have to go to your commercial bank and then get this information. You cannot, as an individual, go to the market, to the securities exchange market. And so when she went to her branch of the commercial bank, who is a primary dealer, the staff told her they don't know about treasury bills and bonds. They did not know, or they did not have this information. So what am I saying? If the interest is reduced, the main beneficiary are those who are in the higher income bracket, those who are earning and those who are aware about this investment. And so this would ideally not be very beneficial to the ordinary citizen, to the private sector person who would want to invest. And so would call upon government first and foremost to do massive awareness raising for citizens to embrace this and invest. But then again, I come to the point on interest payments, because the trend has been that government, over time, we see that government revenues are usually spent on servicing the country's debt. And that is where our concern comes in, because as we stand, we see that first and foremost, the planning is uncertain. Government has so far prepared, is it 3 and still counting budgets for the financial year 2024-25. The Ministry of Finance first shared a 53 trillion budget, where they had planned to have interest payment of 7 trillion, up from 6 trillion this year running. And then later, it has increased to 58 trillion. But the beneficiary from these increments we see is debt servicing, because we see an 8 trillion in interest payment against the 58 trillion budget, and of course debt service increasing to about 25 trillion. And then we hear there is a 60 trillion budget as we speak right now in Parliament, and the interest payment will definitely be over 8 trillion. And debt servicing, which includes the amortization, interest, and etc., increasing to over 30 trillion. So our concern really is about the ability to spend the money that we mobilize in taxes by government on productive sectors of the economy. If government is throwing their nets wide to ensure that they attract investment or they attract funds from the public, that would be good. But what are we spending these monies on? If people come in and invest in bonds, which is a good thing because government is mobilizing funds domestically, but what percentage of these funds are going to be plowed back into the economy in form of development spending, as opposed to financing debts and maybe the wage bill? And so as we stand, we see that it is barely above 6 trillion will be spent on servicing the economy, development expenditure, as opposed to debt. So that would be our biggest concern. Thank you very much.
My name is Roma Kennedy. I'm a member of the Tax Justice Alliance. I work for Uganda Parliamentary Network on illicit financial flows and tax justice. I think my colleagues have expressed our position. By principle, taxation must be fair, it must be progressive, it must have a common sense of equity, so that the burden to the taxpayer does not burden to the extent that the person feels this is not fair to me. And I think the proposal that we have put here, in one way or the other, some of the proposals that come from the government, we feel undermines the principles of equity, of progressiveness, and that's why we think that the government needs to review. And now the burden now goes to the members of the parliament who have the duty to protect the taxpayer from what is supposed to be burdening. I will only speak out to issues of IFFs, which is the illicit financial flows, which actually undermines greatly the effort made by the tax bodies to collect money for domestic use, for resource allocations. The data that we have recently indicates that Uganda, in about half of the financial year, we lose over 500 billion shillings. So if we lose about, in half a financial year, we lose about over 500 billion shillings. So that is a good money that we think that the government must be able to curb ways that can be able to eliminate the ideas of illicit financial flows. The IFFs, the illicit financial flows, these are monies that come, that circulate in the country, but you cannot be able to track them. You can't hold them, but they are circulating in the economy. And yet, if you had improved systems, this money can be channeled instead of burdening the taxpayer on other things that we see that is coming from the government. The other thing I want to finally say is the proposal to have taxation of non-business described of lands, that we think it undermines the equity in the sense that they have indicated specific areas. They have cities, municipalities, or the urban areas. But Uganda generally is a planning area. Now, if you're going to deal and have a proposal of a tax that only has a component for a specific place, we think that is going to be very discriminative, and that is why we think that the government should be able to rethink about it. Much as we highly welcome the idea, taxation is not a bad idea, but taxation should not be treated in isolation to the effects that it has on the businesses, on the population, on the service delivery to the people. So that is why we would implore the government to look broadly and have a consideration for the views that for us we say as citizens, that it will be able to help even the government to mitigate issues of loss of revenue. And just to conclude, like one of my colleagues said, as much as there is an appetite from the government to collect revenue for service delivery, I think the government should begin to put a lot more emphasis on improving the system that can be able to contain misuse of finances or resources collected in each financial year. I think we have a lot of gaps that if we channel the energy, or if the government channel the energy, that could be able to save the country a lot of money. Instead of overburdening the taxpayer, would have a broader way of taxation that can be able to pull a lot of resources, not necessarily every time increasing taxes or finding where to have a pressing tax on the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, our distinguished panel. Now I'll give an opportunity to the media to ask questions. As we go to the Luganda version, can we, is there anyone in the media that is interested in asking a question? Ladu?
Good morning. Just two simple questions. One is, when we speak of productive sector, I've heard this many times, that the money should be put in productive sector. Now I'm just trying to find out what do we mean when we speak of productive sector. I'd like to assume that, I'm not sure, you correct me if I'm wrong, that agriculture could be one of them. But under which value chain in agriculture should that money be put? For instance, should it be in nuts? Should it be, where should it be? Then one last one is, of course, government seems to have proven incapable of widening the tax base. Now what they are doing, they are now deepening it. But we know, and Christine, probably this for you, that part of paying off the debt, part of the deal is that money should come from money that has been collected domestically. That is what should be used to offset the spiraling debt. We also know that government is incapable of widening that base to help it pay off that debt. So what they have to do is to deepen from what we already have. Now, what's the future? Because it seems we are stuck. What they are trying to do, you are saying it should be fair, it should be equitable, but they've proven that it just can't happen. So how do we go forward? I'd like your thoughts on that and other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Ladu. Any other question?
Recently, the Ministry of Finance proposed that they want to increase the economy by 10-fold in the next 15 years to come. Don't you think there will be more taxes to come since they want to increase the economy by 10-fold?
Is that it?
I think first I will respond to the one that Kadu asked about the production sector. Ladu, the one that he asked about the production sectors, then I'll let my other colleagues to come. One, when it comes to investment in the production sectors, one, we have to look at the budget strategy. And what does the budget strategy say? If the government is desirous that we move from a raw material or agro-based kind of export or production, or like whatever it is that is premised much more of us continuing to base on raw materials or raw form of agricultural products, I think the most prudent one would be that one, investment is done in the agriculture sector. Secondly, the one would be investment in areas like manufacturing, and thirdly, in areas like private sector development. However, the people that may be experts on the budget, they will give us the figures. But if you're looking at the fact that the budget allocations towards these three particular sectors are reducing year in, year out, this affects because one, you're not going to invest little and expect the sectors that you're investing in, like manufacturing, to produce a lot, especially when they're not being facilitated in the way they're supposed to be facilitated. If our manufacturing capacity remains below the average and it is just at 35%, and yet you're looking towards a value addition, that means your budget allocation towards that particular sector has to be much more streamlined so that your investment streamlines exactly what you're supposed to be benefiting in terms of the return on investment. In regards to widening or deepening of the tax base, I think that's where the IFRS system comes in, because in the ordinarily sense of the IFRS system, as if we are to benchmark on what the other countries have gone through, it is supposed to widen the scope of how tax is supposed to be administered. So that would mean, in essence, that even the people that were not previously under the tax bracket are supposed to fall within that, because the only way government is going to determine that is if they use a system to track how your economic activity runs. So this means essentially that in order to widen the tax base, because if you look at Uganda's tax regime, you'll find that it sits on only a few people. For example, an employee that earns 30 million Ugandan shillings in a year pays 30% of their taxes. Omusobozi, the business trader that makes a gross turnover of 30 million, which is the same, only pays 80,000 under the presumptive tax regime. So I don't know whether that speaks to the fairness or that speaks to the broadening of the tax base. So we also realizing that the number of people that are not within the tax system, because we have a very large informal sector compared to the formal sector. So this is something that is supposed to help us streamline that. In regards to more taxes is the only sustainable way of financing the budget. All we are asking for is it has to be spread out so that people everyone can contribute their fair share of taxation. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to speak to Ladu's concern on the deepening as opposed to widening the tax base, I see government coming out this time and attempting to widen the tax base, like I'd already alluded, in the exemption of incomes earned from government securities, specifically on the secondary market. Because at the secondary market, that is where we see any citizen being able to play or to come and deal. And how do you do that? That is through your bank. And so by doing this, government is ideally attracting, it is not even forcing you to lend to it. It is basically trying to attract you to buy the bonds and the bills at a much fairer rate or at an attractive rate. So as you invest in these bonds or bills, you're ideally lending to government. And any citizen, like I'd said, even at 100,000 shillings, you can go and invest in government securities and you're able to earn some interest or some income on your investment. And I see that as widening the tax base.